We did it, guys. We've made it to 10 episodes of the Foley and James podcast, double figures. And as always for this one, joining me today is Foley.
Hello.
We are going to be talking about something a little bit different. Obviously, we finished our sort of travel story series 1, and we decided we're going to start going on to something more about what a podcast is, because we know that the people who are listening to this at the moment are mostly just our friends, and as far as I'm aware, not many of our friends actually listen to podcasts, and so thought it might be interesting to do one sort of opening that world to people, because I know that the two of us get a lot out of them.
Okay, yeah, so guys, we're just going to start initially talking about kind of what is a podcast in a sense. A podcast is, I'm not 100% sure how to describe it, but it comes down to somebody or a group of people. It can be just chatting about a topic, like we were chatting about a series of events, like we did in a few of them. It could be doing an interview, like some of our favorite ones. Do just one-on-one interviews, that kind of thing. It could be just them talking. One of our joint favourite ones is just a stand-up comedian rambling away for an hour about different things. People might write into him and he'll answer questions, that kind of thing. So there's the audio podcast, which is this format where you can't see us, which is, a shame on your part, really.
Well, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah. And then there's a video podcast, or a vodcast, as I've heard it called, which is nothing to do with vodka.
No way.
Yeah, I've heard it called that, I swear.
That's awful.
I know, and there's nothing to do with vodka either. Which is essentially like, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this via YouTube, it'd be if we had a video up as well, So they're the kind of basics of a podcast. There's so many apps out there for podcasts. I know, James, you have yours on iTunes, right?
Yeah, I have mine on iTunes. I mean, there's obviously, because I've got an Apple phone, iPhone, but I mean, you can get them everywhere, man. You can get them on things like Google Play, obviously, Acast, Stitcher, SoundCloud. As you mentioned, YouTube for video podcasts and also audio podcasts, which is, part of the reason why we started on YouTube, because for us it was just easier to upload straight to there rather than going to podcast platforms to begin with. But the way I would describe what a podcast is, it's just essentially radio on demand, if you like. I mean, radio's sort of gone out of fashion in the recent years since the internet, essentially. And you can just get everything you want, and everything's got a video. You've got things like Vines, you've got all these things that are visually and audibly stimulating and all this sort of stuff, and they're so short that why would you just listen to radio anymore? But a podcast is a little bit different. It could be anything. I mean, the sorts of things that they cover, I mean, you'll be amazed, to be honest. The video ones, as you say, offer something a little bit more. And actually, that's how I got into podcasts, was through the video version of them. And I mean, I don't know if you've heard, Foley, of the Ricky Gervais podcast. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I had that initially, actually, for a while. I don't know why I unsubscribed.
Well, that was the Ricky Gervais podcast. I mean, I'm sure most people listening will recognise that name. He's a British comedian who's very, very popular in the UK and the US, or North America. And he used to have a radio show in England from which they just took the best parts and released a weekly podcast from the best parts of the show that week. Based on that, they then went and got a TV deal and made the Ricky Gervais show. Some of you may have seen that if you're from the UK or from the US. I believe that was on HBO. It was the audio from their podcast, and they just had some animation put over the top of it to make it funny. And that was really my first sort of introduction into what podcasting was. It was through the video medium. And then I sort of moved along from that and came across one from a guy called Joe Rogan. Now, if that name sounds familiar, you're probably either into comedy or into UFC, because he is a stand-up comedian and he is the sort of the commentator for the UFC who's been there since day one. You'll recognise his voice for sure. And his podcasts, he does both audio and video versions. Those video podcasts are what really got me into it, and it was actually going to South America which made me make the transition over to audio, because they're smaller files to download onto my phone, and I could just have something, I don't know, a little bit more interesting to listen to rather than just music on the sort of crazy long bus journeys that we've spoken about, obviously in previous episodes. It was me that got you into them, right, Foley?
Yeah. Yeah, because when we went travelling, I had my Kindle initially that I bought second hand for 50 quid. I had quite a few books on it, which is great. I'm like, okay, anytime we're anywhere, anytime we're travelling or just chilling in a hostel or something, I've got a Kindle. Brilliant. Of course, we had to get a very early flight in Rio once leaving the hostel. I was in a hurry and ended up leaving my Kindle in the hostel. So I was like, okay, what the hell am I going to do now on these long trips? And you suggested podcasts. Now, of course, I'd heard of them. I knew what they were and everything, but I'd never really gotten into it. So I had an Android phone. So the app that I've always used is an app called Podcast Addict. I don't think it's an overly well-known one. I've never heard anyone else using it, and it's great. And having a look back, and here we are, slowly becoming famous for our own one.
Well, yeah, all right.
Very slowly becoming famous for our own.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the same then for you. That was just a really easy way of killing 30 hours on a bus ride. Do you still listen to them at home? Obviously, now that you're back, or now that you're not traveling anymore. I mean, I listen to them all the time. I sort of, on my walk to uni or walking into town or sitting on a bus or whatever it is, I'll usually have my headphones in, but I don't listen to music anymore, really. I'm listening to podcasts. Do you listen to them regularly still?
Yeah, so I've subscribed to about 31 at the minute, and kind of 25, 26 of them churn out regular content, weekly or bi-weekly, whatever. And if I go out running, I'll listen to music. If I'm in the gym or if I'm doing a sprinting session or something like that, I will listen to a podcast. Yeah, without a doubt. Like I'm not a person to listen to music in the gym. I'll happily listen to a podcast because it could be an hour and a half long podcast. Suddenly I'm an hour and a half done in the gym. And I'm like, oh great, it's been an hour and a half. I don't feel too destroyed, because I've had a continuation, not just music every 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's interesting. What sort of podcast do you listen to in the gym? I don't think I would do that. Just I can't imagine listening to a podcast while trying to work out or do a sprint session. What do you listen to? What sort of podcast do you listen to?
Normally, what I try and listen to in the gym is obstacle course racing ones. There's one called Spartan Up. They're normally 20 to 25 minutes, and they actually go around and talk to, how to put it, like kind of inspirational people in businesses, not always in businesses, obviously, but inspirational and successful people, how they became successful, their backstory and stuff like that. And some people will have gotten involved in obstacle course racing, and like it's the head of the Spartan races, Joe DeSena, who does the interviews most of the time. They don't just have someone to do the interviews. It's the head guy that does them, to meet with these kind of successful, influential people.
That's cool.
Stuff like that.
Are you using that as motivation for your workout? I mean, because obviously it's obstacle racing and you're in the gym, like I'm just trying to make the connection there. Or is it more like a distraction from the workout?
No, I think it is a bit of motivation, definitely. One of them that I was listening to, we'll come on to it later, but he was going through kind of a tough time, a couple of months. He ended up getting diagnosed with as being bipolar, but he suffers from anxiety as well, like separately from this. So he was going through a couple of months of really hard time, and that'd be the first 10 or 15 minutes of the podcast, giving you updates and stuff. And
oh wow,
those kind of things, like that's one of the things about the obstacle course racing. It's one of the community in that it's phenomenal. But so anytime I was kind of feeling rough, whether it was in the gym or not, it's listening to something like that really helped.
Huh, interesting. And so you've obviously mentioned that you've got obstacle course racing, so I mean that's sort of sports and health and fitness type thing. What other genres, if you like, of podcasts do you listen to?
That I listen to, or just in general?
Both, whatever.
Yeah. I was about to say I'll start off in general, but I'm sure I'd miss out God knows how many. For all I know, there could be there could be a podcast out there about what type of soil is best for you. Growing tomatoes. Like there probably is. Because as you said, it's kind of radio on demand, and instead of having a 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon on BBC Radio 4 of a couple of hours listening, you could have a podcast every week about it. People can listen at their own leisure.
Well, I don't think we actually specified, you download these things, unless it's on YouTube, but if it's on a podcast platform, you download it when it comes out. It might come out on a Sunday like ours does, but if you're downloading it on a podcast platform, then you just listen to that in your own time whenever you're ready. That's what's really cool about them.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, literally looking through mine now, I've got a couple of 5 Live ones. So that's sport. One of them's sport. One of them's football specific. So I'm sticking with football, not soccer. I have a couple of other football ones. I won't name them. We'll get into some of the names a little bit later. Quite a few NFL ones because I love the NFL fantasy, but I love the NFL in itself as well. 3 or 4 obstacle racing ones. A couple of just, I'm not saying generic ones, but like one of them would be Fighting Talk, which is on BBC early Saturday mornings, quiz show. And then another one is the podcast version of Rod Gilbert's radio show. And it's great because they normally condense it down to half an hour. They take out all the music, so you just have all the chatting and all the crack that's going on.
So Rod Gilbert's a Welsh comedian, stand-up comedian, and he has his own radio show. I'm just thinking that most of our listeners are not from the UK, so they might not know that.
True. And then there's a couple of interview ones. So like one of them, it's one of my favorites. You know, it was one of the early ones that I got as well, called An Irishman Abroad, and he's up on episode 186 episodes out of. So he's the Irishman Abroad, the guy that does it, Jarlath Regan. Again, I'll get into a little bit more detail, and he'll interview people who are Irish or who have Irish backgrounds. Not all the time. Some of them just don't at all, but some of them might have a very tenuous link, and he'll interview them, successful people in all kind of walks of life. And then a couple of other ones, if you want to. I don't know what you'd put in. They're educational / humor. One that we both like. Again, we'll get into them later, but the stuff you should know. Then there's the cracked one, which is just random a lot of time. And then TED Talks as well. You can get the TED Talks.
Is that a podcast as well?
You can get the audio version of a lot of the TED Talks, yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. They're not as beneficial, we'd say, as watching them because, a lot of the TED Talks that are given have presentations with them and have pictures. But you can still get the gist of it, which is kind of cool.
That is cool. I didn't know they put that onto a podcast. I'll have to look at that. I went through all of the podcasts that I've got and sort of jotted down the genres because they're just so varied. I'm just like, I want to try and make clear that there is a podcast for everyone. This isn't something that, you just like listening to sports, so podcast is all about sports, and so therefore it's not for me because I don't like sports. Like, there is everything. So just for example, I've subscribed to 23 podcasts and they cover a mixture of the following things. So I do have sports and health, but they've got comedy, sex, crime, news, history, music, drugs, as you mentioned, lots of interviews with various people, business, lifestyle, philosophy, science, and conspiracy theories, just because I find them interesting. I'm not a conspiracy theory nut or anything, but yeah. But there's such a broad spectrum of things. Like, whatever your interest is, there'll be a podcast for it. And it's just something that keeps you, I don't know, it's just like gives you more information about something that you're already interested in, or something, something you already like. I think they're great.
Yeah, no, definitely. I actually forgot to do that. So like, I look at mine and I can go to categories, and my categories. They're very broad categories, obviously, but like sport and rec is my largest one because there's so many in that. The society and culture, I'm not even sure which 3 would fall into that. There's two in health, 1 in education, and 4 in comedy. But a lot of them, I like a lot of the sport ones because they're funny. They're they're humorous as well, which helps. I'm not a type of person to sit and listen to someone just talking stats for an hour. Although saying that, I do have a podcast called Stats Bomb. but even that is a little bit funny.
No, that's good. What's that about? Like, don't just say stats. Like, what sort of sports and stuff?
No, football.
Football.
Yeah, football.
Cool.
Premiership normally, and then occasionally they hit like Champions League. But yeah, normally the Premiership.
Nice. So let's talk about our oldest podcast that we subscribe to that's on our phones, because I know that it's the same one. Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast. It doesn't need any advertising on our tiny little podcast because it's a huge monster of a thing. But Foley, go ahead and tell them what it's about.
Oh, what isn't it about? It's Bill Burr. He's a stand-up comedian originally from Boston, living in LA, and on a Monday he'll do approximately an hour. Sometimes it goes over, sometimes not quite an hour of just telling the listener about what he's been up to, this kind of thing. But he's hilarious. I love him to bits. You got me on him. One of my mates had mentioned him to me previously, but I'd forgotten about that altogether. He just mentioned him as like a YouTube hit kind of guy. And yeah, you got me onto the podcast, and it's hilarious. Now he does Thursday afternoon, Monday morning podcast where just a little half an hour of a check-in, and then he'll include some of his older podcasts on that as well. But he spends about half an hour, 35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes talking about his own stuff, and then he'll do 20 minutes to half an hour at the end of like people writing in questions and all of that kind of thing, and he'll answer them in his own unique way, shall we say.
Yeah, he like offers advice, and people will write him with like relationship questions or like moral issues or things in their life, whatever. Like they want a genuine answer, but they also, because he's like 50 years old, right? So he's got some experience and he's able to give decent advice, but he's also hilarious. And so the stuff he comes out with is ridiculous sometimes. And also like he's doing this by himself, just talking into a mic. The two of us here just having a conversation. It's easy to flow, and if one of us doesn't have something to say, then the other person can pick up the slack, But he just does this, talks for an hour, twice a week, every week. Like it's really good, and it's always funny. It's really really good.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So was that one of your first ones as well?
That was the first one that I got as an audio. Like I said, I got into them through the Ricky Gervais show and Joe Rogan Experience on YouTube. But it's the first one in my podcast library, followed very closely.
Nice.
Because the reason why is I was watching the Joe Rogan Experience, and Bill Burr was on there as one of his guests. I didn't know who the guy was. I was just going through the episodes of Joe Rogan, and this guy was just so funny. Obviously, Joe's a comedian too, so they were just bantering back and forth. They're both from Boston. They've known each other for years. It was great. And he mentioned that he had a podcast. And this was just before we flew to South America, and I just thought, all right, I'm going to subscribe to that. And that actually was the first one I subscribed to, and I've never not missed an episode. I still listen to them twice a week. They're so funny.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome.
What's your most recent one? Let's go. So we got oldest and most recent. What's your most recent one?
Okay, so yeah, Bill Burr, as you said, is my most recent, or my oldest one as well, because you got me into it that way. My most recent one, I can't remember. It's possibly one called Dirt in Your Skirt. It's it's an obstacle course racing one. It's a couple actually. It's a woman that does it, so that's why that kind of name.
Gotcha.
And then it's either that one or it's one called the Goalmouth, which Goalmouth, it does it Monday to Friday daily. It's literally 5 to 7 minutes. First thing in the morning of it's an American based podcast, but they do have English presenters on it, of just soccer news. So literally, I'd get it at 9-10 o'clock in the morning, 5 or 6 minutes in, and there might be one or two stories that I didn't hear about the day before, or like they actually, today I listened to it and they had a goal on, obviously it's a podcast, so I didn't see it, but they told me to go look up this goal. And it was worth watching because it's this guy. He does a front flip throw in. Defender knocks it up in the air, and then the finish is a bicycle kick as a goal. It's just phenomenal. Wow. But it's scored in the second or third level of the USA, so it's not something that you'd see everywhere else. Yeah.
You do. You just get these little nuggets of information that you might not otherwise that might not appear in your Facebook feed or something.
Yeah, exactly. What about yours? What's your most recent one?
My most recent one is actually one that I deleted and then re-download or resubscribe to. It's called The Magic Sponge, and it's with comedian Rob Beckett and ex-football player Jimmy Bullard. And it's a sport comedy podcast, as you might imagine, based on the hosts. And they just interview various ex-footballers, and I don't know how it is in other countries, but footballers in the UK, particularly from sort of the 90s, 80s and 70s, those guys did some ridiculous stuff, because they're obviously young with a lot of money, and some of the stuff they get up to is hilarious. And when you've got a comedian leading the show, it's just really funny thing. The reason I deleted it originally was because they had one series and then they didn't do anything for like about 8 months, and so I thought, oh, they're finished. They haven't got a second series. And I don't know how I stumbled across it again very recently, but they've actually on to series 5 now. And I subscribed straight away. So that is technically my most recent one, although it's not really. Right, so that brings us around to almost the end of this episode. Now let's mention for the listeners what our podcast, or what our goals for our podcast are. I mean, we've mentioned numerous times in numerous outros to these things that we are going to be going onto podcast platforms eventually. We're looking to do that sort of around summertime, hopefully. We just want to get a bit of a back catalogue up so we can get them up there, and you can get them downloaded onto your phone nice and easily, and you can sort of binge listen if you like. But, like, Foley, what do we aim to do with this thing?
That's a good question. Well, I guess we kind of started it first because, like, both of us love podcasts. You know, obviously, spent the last 25 minutes talking about them. And it's a great way to just get some of our stories out there, you know, and not just that, it's another way to keep in touch, that kind of thing. It's another way for people that we know to, I don't want to say be involved in our lives, but, you know, have a little nugget of what our lives, what we're at. And
let's just make clear at this stage, we're not incredibly big-headed and think that our lives are so great and everyone needs to know about them. We don't live in our home countries, and so we're actually really far away from our closest friends and family. So I'm currently living for the past few months. I've been in Luxembourg. Before that, I've spent 4 years living in Germany. Foley, you're in Canada, right?
Yeah, East Coast of Canada, sorry. Nova Scotia, and like similar to you, I spent 4 years in England. I'm from the west coast of Ireland, so yeah, kind of been around a lot, and yeah, it is a good way of doing that. You know, just even if it's only our very close friends and family listening to it, it's still something. It's nice, you know. And I agree with what you're saying. It's like we're not that big-headed that we think our stories are that incredible to be told, but at the same time, we think we have a few stories to tell, so why not tell them?
Yeah, I think they're nice enough, funny enough. Some of them, I think it's all right. You know,
yeah.
I think even people who don't know us can get some entertainment value out of it, which is definitely the aim of going forward. You know, we're brand new at this. We are absolute novices. We are fanboys of podcasts that have just decided to give it a go. But basically, that's where you as the listener comes in. Like this. The importance of getting listener support is really high, just for us particularly. Not only just because it motivates us, like it's also about getting awareness to people who aren't, you know, friends with us on Facebook, because those are the only people we're sharing with at the moment. You know, it's about getting the word out there to these other people who don't know us, and if we can get complete strangers interested in what we're doing, that'll feel really good, and it'll motivate us to go further, and we'll just keep going, and we'll maybe get better equipment and all that sort of stuff. You know, who knows what it might lead into, but what do you find is the sort of benefit of getting the support from the listeners? You know, what do they get out of it, and what do we get out of it?
Yeah, well, what we get out of it, obviously, is it's a platform for us to just express ourselves in one way. You know, we're not going to be going out there painting bloody murals on walls or anything like that, because I don't have any artistic talent. I know that much. But it's something that we can do and share. And hey, if we inspire one person to go and visit South America, or one person to pick up another podcast in their podcast listening, you know, something like that, it's great. What we get from the support of the people it's huge. It starts to grow. And for us, that's amazing. And eventually, you know, if we got 100 genuine listens on episode 20, you know, something like that, we're only not even halfway there yet. That for me would be phenomenal to get that much. I can't see it happening yet, but at the same time, if every one person listening to this shares it with one other person, and that grows, and then who knows? In 4 or 5 kind of turns around, we might have 16 people.
No, that is literally the way it works. There is no other. I mean, it's it's weird because I'm asking, you know, people to share this thing when I see people asking to share stuff all the time, like crappy viral videos, you know, and stuff that not made by that person, but they'll share those sorts of things, and then you know, just give ours a share as well, man. Come on.
yeah, guys, and like, you know, it's on YouTube, and eventually it will be on podcast format, but at the minute, it's like 2 or 3 clicks, copy and paste on a Facebook or something like that. And again, if one of your 3, 4, 500 friends on Facebook listens to it, great. It's a bonus. It's one more person. Eventually down the line, who knows? We might have competitions. I've got this lovely mug. I'll send it to you if you enter a competition and we get more than 7 entries. But yeah, so guys, keep listening, keep sharing, comment as well. We have one regular commenter, Chris, who actually very recently completed the Brighton, I think it was, marathon. So way to go, Chris. That's fairly phenomenal. But yeah, guys, listen, share, comment, like, all the usual social media stuff. And as soon as I said social media stuff, I think we'll draw a line there for this episode. Next episode, we're still going to continue talking about podcasts, but it's only going to be the 2 on podcast this time, not the 9 we had on travel. But next time around, we're going to talk about the 5 or 6 podcasts, that we enjoy the most. We're going to share that with you guys. We're both on Facebook, obviously, myself and James. We're both on Twitter. James is @TweetBelsey. I'm @OCRCove. That's my handle on Instagram. And on Snapchat, I'm CrazyAxel. And you can email us, surprise, surprise, at our show.
We're getting bigger.
I know, right? Our email address is something that I came up with after a couple of drinks, and we're going to stick with it for now. It's hammocks.life@gmail.com. So, feel free to email us, ask us a few questions. We'll be happy to give you our thoughts on whatever topic you want. As I said, topics, give us a topic for a podcast, We'll spend at least 10 minutes researching it, and then we'll talk for half an hour or an hour on it, So unless James has anything else to add to that.
No, sir.
Excellent. Well, all right, guys, we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.